Councillor Loden. 1 minute, I think we went a bit early. Okay, 6 o'clock, we can start. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this evening's council meeting of the 23rd of August, 2022. I'd like to declare the meeting open at 6 p.m. and welcome you all to the meeting and acknowledge that tonight we are meeting on Whadjuk Noongar Boodja and pay respects to elders past and present. In terms of apologies of members on leave of absence, we don't have any of apologies or leaves of absence. I'm just noting that Councillor Loden hasn't yet arrived, but we are expecting him to be here this evening. Unless, CEO, you've heard anything different? No? Okay. All right. So we'll move directly to public question time. Here he is. Speak of oh, thank you. A fresh mask. Beautiful. Thank you, Councillor Loden. So we'll go to public question time and receiving of public statements. Welcome, members of the public gallery. Lovely to see you here this evening. We do welcome you to speak at our meeting. If you'd like to come forward, please do just state your name, the suburb in which you reside and the item that you're speaking on. If you did attend last week and spoke to us about this, a matter that you're speaking to us again, please don't feel that you need to repeat things that you have said, but if you have anything new and additional you wish to add, that would be appreciated. So I'll open public question time to you. It's just whoever wishes to come first. Yep. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Cole, councillors and staff. My name is Andrew Dillarito of Mount Hawthorn. My wife and I are the landowners of number 72, the Boulevard, Mount Hawthorn. And tonight I'm speaking in support of the officer's recommendation for approval for our proposed new 2-storey single house at the property. We've always loved Mount Hawthorn and purchased this property in 2020 before the character retention guidelines were adopted by council. This didn't deter us from wanting to build our dream family home, as we always had the intention of designing a home that not only suited our needs, but also respected the character of the area. During this application process, ourselves, our architects and planners worked collaboratively with the council's officers to provide a design response that now results in all greens and full support from the DRP's heritage expert. The dwelling incorporates architectural design elements, including an asymmetrical presentation to the street, a large front veranda, a pitched roof form with gables, a weatherboard external facade, timber balustrades, and multiple paned windows. It is evident by the positive commentary in the officer's report that our house has been thoughtfully designed to reflect the statement of character of the Boulevard and Matlock Street character area. As a result, the proposal is supported by the city's administration and the DRP heritage expert, and we ask the council to follow suit and approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Kevin Van Bever. I reside on 177 Sterling Street, 6000 Perth. And I would like to talk to you about the problems we're having at the Wells Square Park. I've been living in the area for about 5 years and loved it absolutely. But the last couple of years, there's a massive decline in the pleasure of living there. There's been heaps of problems with homeless people, blatant drug use, antisocial behavior, to the point where it's actually, we don't feel safe anymore actually walking through the park. And I wonder what the council is actually thinking about doing to resolve this situation, because we've seen a massive decline in the last couple of years. And it's very, very frustrating. Like, for example, when you want to go out with your kids and play in the park and you find discarded needles, you find Ziploc bags of drugs, you get abused by people. It is very, very painful to live in that situation. And I would hope the council would take it upon themselves to address this issue and make sure something happens about it. Then one more thing, I'm speaking on behalf of the owner of a Brica restaurant, resided at 177 Sterling Street as well. He's totally fed up as well. Like, he's been broken into multiple times. He had his customers threatened and intimidated. He's actually been threatened by with a knife. Like last week, he got broken into, where these drug-affected people actually kick in his door and just come in and steal whatever they can, like in a quick grab. So yeah, something needs to happen, because I've called you, I've called the council, I've spoken to police, and it's always seems to be like a patch up solution where they go like, okay, cool, just report it, but nothing seems to happen. So I'm hoping, yeah, me coming forward here will actually result in some positive action that will resolve the situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you say Kevin? Oh, just if we could get your details before, I might just, put you in touch. Look, we did go through quite a period of scrutinising World Park when we had the Manor Inc. food truck operating from the park, and we made the decision as a council to not continue having that food service in World Square. At that point, we understood that that had made quite a difference to the way the area was operating. It certainly is that we have peaks and troughs there, and we, at that point, we believed that that had improved. And I have heard from another business owner recently, so obviously things are flaring up again. So happy to track this through and actually find out a little bit more from, not just from our rangers and from our Safe Events officer, but through our partnerships with Noongar Outreach, Police, homeless services. We have touch points with all of those. We try to operate in a partnership so we can find out what's happening at World Square at the moment, because we certainly did see some improvement after we decided to bring the food truck. Not that Manor Inc. was a problem, but just in terms of attracting people, we had camping and all sorts of things happening. So I'm happy to check in again and find out what's been going on at World Square. Okay.
It's just the park, like sometimes you see people like urinating.
Yep. Okay, so I can't have this conversation with you right now, but I appreciate you coming tonight, and Virginia will get your details, and we'll get across what's happening there and work with our partners on that as well. Thank you, Kevin. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, councillors. My name's Elio Marto, located in North Perth. I attended a council meeting a few weeks ago, and I spoke in regard to Charles Villiard Reserve flood lighting upgrade that was proposed at the time. At the time, I raised issues about the manner in which the project had progressed, how it had appeared to have circumvented certain community consultation processes, how local residents weren't informed. Now, a number of questions were put to council at the time, and they were responded to by Mr. Murphy. However, I'm not particularly satisfied with some of the responses, because they simply don't address the fundamental issues that I'd raised at the previous meeting. I think it's important to, and in spite of those questions raised, the project they've carried on with the project and continued to do works, including excavating and reinforcing the foundations, which is part of $25,000 of expenditure, which has only been raised as being for future meetings to be discussed at the first quarter budget review to see where those funds would be sourced from. However, it appears those funds have already been committed, in spite of the fact that there seems to be no budget for it. I'll also point out too that the works appear to have shifted the poles. My view is, having seen those poles over a number of years, that the poles have actually now moved because of the works that have been carried out around the foundations. However, In spite of that, there's still fundamental issues with the way that project's progressing, and I'm not satisfied that there's been sufficient due diligence done or justification to justify that particular project. Now, as far as I know, there's something in the order. I've been advised that there's about $135,000 worth of funds required to complete this project. That doesn't include funds that have probably been committed on top of that for wages, salaries, and contract employees to carry out that work. I suspect it's probably closer to $200,000, although $100,000 that is due from a government grant. It may only cover half of that project's value. Further to that, there's issues, fundamental issues with the project, which appear to have been overlooked in my view. First of all, there's the question of the heritage value of that particular park. Charles Veryard Reserve is on the Municipal Heritage Inventory and has been since 2009. Now, back when the light towers were first approved, there's no mention in any of the project officers' report to council of anything to do with heritage for that park. And the park requires, under your own policy, requires a heritage impact statement to be carried out and report back done before any approvals. That's never happened. It didn't happen in 2015, and it hasn't happened now, in spite of the fact that it does detract, the light towers do detract significantly from the appearance of that park and its heritage value. Second to this, also, the lights are proposed to improve or to make available the land to the park for night use of games, for football in particular. However, it doesn't address the issue which the council has been previously made aware of, in that the noise from the park affects the local residents. Now, in 2020, council conducted noise surveys in the
Sorry,
park.
Elliot, just let you know, you have reached the 3-minute
Sure.
mark, and we have also received the questions that you submitted in writing.
Sure.
Which have been emailed around to council members.
I'll just finish this point if I may.
Yep, go
So
ahead.
noise regulation. So in 2020 conducted a noise survey and found that the noise from the park affecting local residents was 40 times over the statutory noise limits. So this issue has not been addressed, and it doesn't seem to be a case of it's been addressed in any of the development of this particular project. So I also point to that we do have Britannia Reserve that's recently been upgraded, and as far as I'm aware too, the park is available on the evenings that have been requested, that is proposed to be used in Charles Veryard Reserve for night football games. So there are other venues that can be used for this without having to unnecessarily spend and upgrade that lighting at Charles Veryard Reserve.
Okay, thank you, Elio.
Thank you very much, Council. No.
Next speaker, please.
Barbara Abbott, North Perth, speaking to item 10.4. Thank you for the details provided this week on the matter of the recommendation not to proceed with the trial diversion on Leek and Alma. Unfortunately, I was unable to read much of the attached information due to poor resolution in the documents. What I was able to read provided no surety or confidence that sufficient evidence is the foundation of the recommendation to council not to proceed with the trial diversion. It appears the recommendation is founded on uninformed opinions and self-interest of some of the respondents to consultation, and an expert desktop analysis, of which I have no concept of what that would entail. From what I've read, it is supposition and prediction based on evidence, much of which appears irrelevant to this situation. The diversions in Mount Lawley did not provide results such as sending traffic to other residential streets or using laneways. It resulted in traffic using the main roads of Beaufort, Walcott and Vincent, rather than using residential streets. Nowhere in the expert desktop analysis were main streets considered as alternatives for traffic. It appears there is a lack of reasonable consideration as to what a trial diversion could provide by way of evidence. I don't know that a diversion is going to work to reasonably resolve the issues that we have. I'm in a position residing on one of the corners of the intersection to observe the issues firsthand and consider something needs to be tried at the least. I don't know what the best treatment for this is. All that's been offered is the trial diversion. I also know the 40 kilometre limit will not be a resolution. If the stop signs don't work, then it's unlikely drivers would observe the limit. If not a diversion, we need to explore solutions. This cannot be a unique issue. Maybe an expert should be sought to provide advice. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Next speaker, please.
Thank you. Geraldine Box from 129 Alma Road, North Perth, speaking on item 10.4. Prior to coming along tonight, I reflected on this long journey over 5 years, I think, and thought that through all this, we might have lost sight of what are local streets. What's their primary role? What place in the urban context do they have? And I've looked up to see what Austroads would say about that. They say local streets are there to serve a terminal function, that is allowing people to return to their homes or go from their homes. They particularly note that the vehicle flow on local streets is not more important than the needs of other users. And those other users are pedestrians, cyclists, and the residents who live there. This guideline is missing from the current approach. We're not reflecting back, what are our local streets about, which was what started off this whole thing in the first place. The administration's report is confusing. I've sent you all a letter, you've read it, I'm sure, but it's terribly confusing. It lacks clarity. It appears to be designed to confuse the reader. You can't read the pixelated finer details. As I mentioned in my letter to you all, it's not evident in the summary provided by administration. I know that it was received, as I mentioned to you in my letter, my comments and were not mentioned in that report put up in this second agenda by administration. I know it was received. I've got the receipt number. I've got a copy of the feedback I put in. Why isn't it in there? Who else is not in there? I know other residents are now saying to me that they can't see their comments there. What's happening? You are our elected members. You have a duty to stand up for residents. Please support, I really urge you to please support a 12-month trial. It's just a trial of the diagonal diversion at Leek and Alma, a trial which will lead to improved safety and amenity for the residents, and one which may set a future standard for Vincent in managing vehicle flows on our streets. We need to do something different than speed humps. Thanks so much. I may not be here again. Thank you.
Thanks, Geraldine. Any further speakers this evening, please?
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to ask the question about the Villa nightclub in Stirling Street.
That's fine. You're very welcome.
Sorry,
if you might
Amanda
just-
Coventry.
Yeah, and you're a suburb?
Is Perth.
Thank you.
So I live in Stirling Street, and I've been having to put up with this nightclub being there, which has been there for many years. But in the last 10 years or so, that area has become densely populated with residents through apartment buildings being built around it. And the Villa nightclub is quite surrounded by by residents in apartment buildings. We've had 2 incidents lately, one on the 7th of August at 1:33 a.m. and one on the 17th of July at 5 o'clock when a young lady was assaulted. When I've gone out there on both these occasions, the streets have had a lot of young people in them that it almost looks like you're going to have some type of gang fight happening, and police have been called. There's been 5 police vehicles pull up in the morning to try and disperse the people. And there's been one, when that girl was assaulted, there was ambulance and everything else that came in. So that's happened on 2 occasions recently, as well as the noise. So when a complaint is put through, which I've have done before, the noise does go down, so it's not as loud, but it's not so much the music, but it's the thump, thump, thump that comes straight through. I mean, I can feel on my pillow, I have had ornaments in my house vibrating from the thumping, the noise. So I'm just wondering what's going to be happening with it, because it's it's right in the middle of a populated area where people are trying to sleep. And not only that, their hours, they're open from like 10 o'clock till 5 o'clock in the morning. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. I'll just check in with our Director of Strategy and Development. Director, have we received any compliance complaints, or is anything anything to report on this particular matter, noting that sometimes these things are a bit tricky to speak about publicly?
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole, I'm not aware of any ongoing investigations or complaints, but we can certainly have a discussion, and we can look into it and provide you with all the information around the existing approval and what restrictions exist and what can be done to try and help resolve your issue.
Amanda, I might just ask Director John Corbellini just to get your details so that he can put you in touch with a member of our compliance team so that you can talk this through in a little bit more detail. But thank you for coming to the council meeting this evening and letting us know what you're experiencing. Doesn't sound great at all. Any further comments this evening? Okay, thank you very much, everyone. We appreciate you being here and thank you for your comments. In relation to written questions, we have received written questions from Elio Marto, who also spoke this evening, and also from Dudley Meyer, which Wendy did email around to us this afternoon. And we also have response to previous public questions taken on notice in the agenda this evening. Item 4, applications for leave of absence. Are there any requests? I believe we have one from Susie.
Through you, Mayor Cole, Councillor Warner has requested leave of absence from 7 to 24 September of this year.
Thank you very much, CEO. Can I please have a mover and seconder to approve the leave of absence? Moved by Councillor Loden, seconded by Councillor Alexander. All of those in favour? That's carried. Enjoy your leave. We wish we were coming too. So we move on then to receiving of petitions, deputations and presentations. I believe we have none this evening. Confirmation of minutes. This is for the last council meeting, of which the date I don't have before me. Anyone? Happy to help out with the date. 16th of August 2022. Can I please have a mover and seconder to adopt the minutes? Moved by Councillor Wallace, seconded by Councillor Apollo. All those in favour? I declare the minutes carried. Announcements by the presiding member. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that we've had some big news for our staff recently. So I wanted to say a warm congratulations to Virginia Miltrup, our Director of Community and Business, on the big news that you've been appointed as the CEO of the City of Karratha, which is a tremendous achievement. So I just wanted to congratulate you. Yes, of course you can. Moving on from little old Tier 2 Vincent to a major Tier 1 regional council. Very exciting and obviously a big life change for you. We still have you for a little while. So this isn't goodbye just yet. So I'll save all those comments, but just wanted to acknowledge this significant achievement and congratulate you. Also just wanted to note that we have recently welcomed some new managers to the team. Last week you all met Jade Robbins, who's our Manager of City Buildings and Asset Management. And you also met Luke McGurk, our new Manager for Engineering. And yesterday we also have been joined by Lisa Williams, the new Manager of Marketing and Partnerships, who is sitting at the back there. So welcome to all of our new managers. Good to know that as some are leaving, others are joining. It's the cycle of life in local government. So thank you and welcome. And also we did mention last week that Gus Maguire has joined us as the city's new Aboriginal Engagement Officer. And he does hail from Whadjuk Balladong Noongar country. So as Councillor Alexander raised last week, that's a great addition to our team, and particularly exciting given that we are looking to adopt our reconciliation action plan this evening. So that will be a great help in helping us pursue our RAP and the things that we wish to move on with there. So that was all from me this evening, and I'll move now to CEO for item 8, declarations of interest.
Through you, Mayor Cole, as outlined in the agenda and as per last week's council briefing session, I've received two declarations of interest, one from yourself, Mayor Cole, declared an impartiality and potential financial interest in relation to item 9.2, 72, the Boulevard Mount Hawthorn proposed single house, noting that you have a family member residing in a residence on the boulevard. You sought additional advice from WALGA to clarify the potential extent of the interest, and a financial interest may be possible or perceived. On this basis, Mayor Cole will not participate in the debate nor vote on this matter. Councillor Iapolo declared a financial interest in relation to item 17.1, claim for reimbursement legal costs. The extent of the interest is that he stands to benefit financially from approval of this recommendation. He is not seeking to participate in the debate nor vote on this matter. That's all, Mayor Cole.
Councillors, any other declarations of interest before we move on? Okay, thank you. So this evening, the items that have been raised already by members in the public gallery, 9.2 and 10.4. Don't believe we have any majority. No items, okay, and we do have on the table, we have amendments against item 9.8, 10.3 and 10.4. In addition to those items, do council members wish to bring forward other matters, items for discussion? Councillor Hallett.
9.7.
Thank you. Councillor Castle. Councillor Wallace. Councillor Iapolo. Councillor Warner. Councillor Loden.
11.4.
Thank you. Councillor Alexander. Councillor Gondaszewski.
Thank you. 9.6, 10.1 and 12.3, please.
So 9.6, 10.1
And 12.3.
12.3. Okay.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll now read out the agenda item numbers being proposed to be moved en bloc, which includes item 9.1, item 9.3, item 9.4, item 9.5, item 10.2, item 11.1, item 11.2, item 11.3, 12.1, 12.2, 12.4 and 12.5.
Could I please have a mover and seconder to move the en bloc items? Moved by Councillor Loden, seconded by Councillor Castle. All those in favour? I declare those items carried. So the first item raised in this evening was item 9.2, which I have declared a potential financial interest. So I'll ask the Deputy Mayor to come to chair this item.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. We have before us the item relating to number 72, the Boulevard Mount Hawthorn proposed single house. May I have a mover and a seconder for this item? Moved Councillor Loden, seconded Councillor Warner. Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm happy to support the officer recommendation here. I'll listen to the debate and hear what others have to say, but I think this will fit well in the streetscape. The heritage aspects have been engaged with and addressed in many ways, I think. So I'm happy to support the officer recommendation.
Councillor Warner.
Really just repeating what Councillor Loden said, just I appreciate the fact that the residents have worked to fit in with the guidelines and that they've amended their plans accordingly. So I think that this could really go ahead and be successful.
Thank you. Anything further? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? That's passed. Oh, Councillor Alexander, sorry. We're just voting on item 9.2, 72 the Boulevard, Mount Hawthorn. I'll just call it again. Did you have any comments that you wish to make in relation to this item? Okay. All those in favour? And against? Unanimously covered. Thank you.
That was efficient. Okay, the next item raised was item 10.4, outcome of 12-month diagonal, outcome of advertising of 12 months diagonal diversion trial, Elmer Road and Leake Street. Can I have a mover and seconder for this item, please? Move Councillor Loden, seconded Councillor Warner.
Thank you, Mayor. Probably no surprise, given I've requested an alternative motion. I don't support the officer recommendation. My challenge with this is, I guess the first part is around this topic that we seem to keep coming back to, which is around what is an acceptable number of vehicle movements on a street. And I well recognise that we've got this warrant scoring of 3,000 vehicle movements a day, which is what Main Roads defines as an acceptable number of vehicle movements on a street. And every time this comes back to council, which we've been considering for nearly 5 years now, this conversation happens, and the feedback we're getting from the community is that there's too much traffic on these streets, and the direction that council sets on this is that there's too much traffic on these streets. And I feel like there's a disconnect between administration and council on this, and we need to get that alignment correct. 3,000 vehicle movements a day is roughly one vehicle every 30 seconds. That's assuming that you spread it out over the entirety of a day. If you concentrate that into 4 hours a day, that's one car every 5 seconds. So that just seems way too much traffic for what is supposed to be a suburban street. I really like Geraldine's point about the terminal function that we have in our local streets. Those are the objectives that we need to be driving towards. That is what aligns with our accessible city strategy. We want to create safe streets where pedestrians feel safe, where people can ride their bikes, where people can walk, all that sort of stuff. So when we look at that, then we need to find a way to reduce vehicle movements. And I'm not concerned about people within those precincts who are driving from their house to get out of the precinct or go to some other destination within the precinct, whether that's Coles or other shops or something that are in there. The concern I have is for people that are coming from outside the precinct and choosing to cut through these streets to get to their ultimate destination. And we see it happening all over the city, and it's an issue that's getting worse and worse all the time. This isn't the only location we've had to deal with this. We've got basically right on the other side of Fitzgerald Street, we're talking about a safe active street that we're aiming to bring in there that will create a pathway for bikes to get through that precinct, but we'll also find a way to divert traffic away from that so that we can create that safe environment for bikes and for pedestrians as well. So the petition back in 2018 spoke to two issues. One was traffic speed and the second thing was traffic volume. We still haven't addressed the issue of traffic volume. And so as a minimum, from my point of view, if the conclusion is that a diagonal diversion is not the solution for it, then as a minimum, this proposal should say, and we will go away and we will find a better solution to address it. We identify that it's an issue. Part of the conversation here has been that we don't want to do the diagonal diversion because we don't want to move the issue to somewhere else. But then the solution doesn't become, well, we'll just ignore it and leave it as is. From my perspective, a diagonal diversion will be a solution to this. It may not be the perfect solution to it, but it will divert the traffic. We were provided with some really good maps that showed the alternative pathways that people can take to get around the diagonal diversion. And I do acknowledge that if you are within that precinct and you're trying to get from the southwestern corner up to Coles, you'll probably use one of these things. But as you get closer to the extremities of the precinct, you'll probably just go around the outside. And hopefully what we'll see is people that were previously cutting through the middle of the precinct will choose to go around the outside because that is the quicker pathway to either go down underneath or go through and go up the top along, I've forgotten the street name now, but you guys will know the one that we've, View Street. Thank you very much. So that's my take on it. This is all opinion though, right? This is my take looking at how that street's configured and how I think the traffic will flow from my experience as a driver. Administration has a different view, but that's also an opinion. We don't actually have facts. The way we can get facts is by doing a trial and seeing what the results out of that. The thing we can also do is if we do identify issues from that, we can, I'm really struggling today. We can find alternative solutions to those problems. So that's where I sit on this from my perspective. One other comment I did have and is for Andrew Main specifically, who I suspect will either be listening in or will listen to the recording afterwards. He has been advocating for this idea of a median strip. I do acknowledge that is an alternative option that could work. We can't just go and do an amendment to introduce a median strip at this point, but I do genuinely believe that this diagonal diversion can address that issue. The median strip might achieve a similar outcome, but would also have similar impacts with the community as well, if this does divert traffic to other places as well. So I am comfortable that a diagonal diversion is a good solution in that case. It would be interesting if we had our time over and we could rewind 5 years to also include that as an option in part of our consultation with the community. But where I sit, I would rather see us trial this diagonal diversion than kick this down the road, do another set of consultation around a different alternative and potentially find ourselves back here in a year's time with still no solution or way forward. So that's all I'll say. Thank you.
Councillor Warner.
I think Councillor Loden's been reading my notes, basically. That's right. Look, I really I basically agree with what he's saying here. I think this is an issue that's been plaguing the North Perth precinct. So I don't support what's been recommended by admin, and I really do think we need to look into doing a trial. We've got we've had raised intersection plateaus installed, which appear to be giving us a reduction in speed and traffic, which is great. But the residents are still gravely concerned about this. And these installations are not deterring the commercial vehicles that are accessing the North Perth Plaza, which is one of the major bones of contention here. And also, of course, we've got more pedestrians, mobility scooters, bicycles, etc., who are trying to access the plaza. So we're really concentrating on one small space here. The only way to really accurately assess the implication of this proposed diversion is to proceed with a trial. And whilst it may cause traffic diversion to other streets, or it may cause hassle for people accessing the plaza, I think we owe the community a chance to know what these actual impacts are going to be. And this can really only be determined by us giving it a go. Recently, we voted to trial a pedestrian space on Grosvenor Road the argument being that the trial is the only way to accurately gauge what's happening. And I think this is another example of that approach, and we should show consistency in our decision making. Thank you.
Councillors, Councillor Uplow.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'm concurring with the conclusion of both councillors Loden and Warner. But I think it's important because I know that administration put a lot of work into all these things. And so I just want to understand their rationale and then counter it with some of my observations. So I think the administration's recommendation put forward is founded on the fact that that they've implemented council's previous decision to put in 8 raised plateaus at 8 different intersections on Claverton, Elmer and Leek. And on the basis of measurements done in July of this year, that they're arguing that both traffic volume and speed measured in July showed marginal decreases in both flow or volume and speed. I want to address that though. In the table on page 16, attachment 3, that's administration's putting forward of the actual traffic data that it measured in July. And I wanted to note that, July is the wettest month in Perth annually. And in this July, 2022, actually had 7% more rainfall than the long-term average. So my point being July 22 was a particularly wet month. And that table is comparing traffic flow and speeds in months that included February, March and September in prior years. And I think I had a problem with the data that it wasn't like for like. We're comparing, a very wet, rainy month compared to summer or spring months. And I think that just based on that alone and not potentially the raised plateaus that, were installed, it's probable and highly likely that the reduced speeds and reduced volume is due to the weather. If you're comparing those 2 sets of data. So I think I'm in favour also of a trial. I think because this issue has been going on for 5 years, as fellow councillors have already mentioned, a do nothing approach or simply waiting for a reduced speed of 40 kilometres per hour to come in future is not enough. I think the outcome we're all looking for is safer streets. I think we're all in agreement of that. And I think the trial, whether it's 12 months or less, as proposed in one of the amendments, I just think it's a good way to get some data and we will know whether it works or not. And if it doesn't work, then we don't make it permanent. And if it does show signs of improvement in volume and speed, then that's something that we would be looking to do it as a permanent change. So I concur with the outcome that we should proceed to trial.
Thank you, Councillor Uplow. Councillors, Councillor Gontaszewski. Oh, sorry. I saw Councillor Gontaszewski's hand first. I've called your name, Councillor Gontaszewski. Just go with it,
My apologies. Okay, so I guess I just have a question in relation to this, and that one of the things that was raised at last week's briefing session in terms of not proceeding with the diagonal diversion trial was the potential implications on the budget or cost associated with implementing such trial, and appreciate that we're discussing the substantive and not a alternate at this stage, but I guess I just would like to get some clarity in relation to what, if any, budget there is for capital works regarding traffic calming in North Perth, and what the estimated minimum cost of a diversion would be using temporary infrastructure or permanent infrastructure. And then I guess what the cost would be of implementing a raised plateau at that intersection as per the other plateaus that have been implemented in the area.
Through the chair, we do have a budget item. The total figure of the budget, I would need to confirm that, but there is funds to do these types of traffic management treatments. So the budget or the cost for the temporary barriers, the minimum cost would be $30,000, and the minimum cost for the diversion would be $35,000 to complete them diversions.
Sorry, just to get it right in my head. So just for like temporary barriers, water filled type barriers, because there is like a need to hire them or something, that would be an annual cost of 30K. So 15K for 6 months, and a more permanent solution that could be left in situ would be 35K. Okay. And what about the ballpark plateau? Because the existing plateaus that were implemented in the area were done through main roads, is that correct? So there was no cost to the city for those. But what's the general cost of implementing other sort of alternate treatments, such as a raised plateau?
Through the chair, the raised plateau would be similar to the four-way plateau diversion. So that cost would range between $30,000 and $40,000. So minimum $30,000 to do the raised plateau.
Thank you very much. Look, I think, we had a council capacity building session recently that talked about the need for us to ask questions about options, to request options. And I think part of the issue that we've got in this situation is that we have requested some consultation, and the administration's interpretation of the consultation results is that a trial should not proceed. But there hasn't been any other options aside from the do nothing option that's been left on the table. Noting that, I guess there was already the intention in relation to trying to reduce speeds across Vincent and also within this precinct. So if I drove these streets today, and it's odd to me that there is no treatment on this intersection, like even from the perspective of implementing a precinct-wide approach, as I believe was the main road's intention, doing roundabouts on one side of Fitzgerald and plateaus on the other side of Fitzgerald, it is odd that there's nothing like this intersection. So I struggle to move on from this item without saying that, and say, let's do nothing here. I also appreciate that perhaps, what the understanding is that we have taken some action in the area, and that may well be enough to see the change over time that residents are desiring. But I think it would be better if there was something at this intersection so that we could see the impact, like the proper impact. I understand why you wouldn't proceed with a 12-month trial. I don't believe that was ever really something that we canvassed. A 6-month trial is less. I probably would also be supportive of a raised plateau for consistency's sake, particularly if Main Roads wanted to incorporate it into their trial area and fund it. But I think part of the main issue with this motion that we have before us is that it lacks options, and so council is left to grasp. It's not, and I don't think that that's what we want to see here. I think that there is a local distributor parallel to this street that we should be diverting traffic to. There is also main roads parallel to this street that we should be diverting traffic to. And so in this instance, I guess what we're seeing is that there's the alternate motion talks to trying to direct traffic to the local distributor, which in terms of the local road hierarchy is appropriate. So I'm not supportive of a do nothing approach. I think given where we're at, I just feel that we've got to do something at this intersection. So yeah, options would have been great. But yes, I'm not supportive of a decision not to proceed with anything at this stage, so I won't be supporting the officer recommendation.
Can I just ask two questions that go to the issues that you've raised? So first of all, can we just get clarity that Councillor Gontaszewski's thought that if we do water-filled barriers for 6 months, it effectively halves the cost. Is that correct?
Through the chair, there may be a slight cost reduction on hiring the barriers for a 12-month period. The cost would include purchasing the water-fill barriers. We're just concerned that the market wouldn't have the water-fill barriers for hire for that duration. Generally, water-fill barriers, if they're hired, tend to leak and there's issues with them. So the cost was to purchase the water-fill barriers. We could look at a hard option, but it's preferred to purchase them.
Okay, so no necessarily won't reduce the cost. Okay. Yes. The second question is around options, and I just thought it was a little bit confusing with the cost of each type of temporary diversion. What with the four-way plateau diversion, the way I read the plan, is that effectively just a plateau where you can still use the entire intersection? Like, is that, because that does seem to be an option that's been presented, that we would add a four-way plateau at the cost of $30,000 to $40,000 as one of the options, but does that mean you will still be able to travel in all directions as you currently can?
Through the chair, yes, the four-way race plateau would still allow traffic flow through Alma and Lake Street.
Okay, and would there be any chance of seeking funding for that from Main Roads as part of this precinct, or have we done our dash with the funding to traffic calm this precinct with Main Roads?
Through the chair, I believe the funding was last financial year, so I'm not sure if there would be an opportunity. The funds have been spent on the raised plateaus that are completed. I would need to approach Main Roads and see if there was any alternate or future funding for a raised plateau in that area.
Okay, and then the other question I had is whether we would need Main Roads approval to do the temporary trial of the diversion, because it seemed to suggest that was the case in the report, but I just wanted absolute clarity on that.
Through the chair, yes, we do need Main Roads approval. The signs and lines drawings go to Main Roads for approval. So if they approved it, we could go ahead. If they don't approve it, we wouldn't be able to go ahead.
So I just wanted all council members to be clear that whatever decision is made here, if it is to approve a diagonal diversion, this is not the final say. Main Roads would have to give approval. So I'll go back to you, Councillor Gontaszewski.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. I just have one question in relation to engagement with Main Roads, is that prior to engaging with Main Roads in terms of either obtaining, has engagement with Main Roads to date included any, I guess, advice or in principle support? Sorry if I've missed it, in relation to the proposed diagonal diversion?
Through the chair, I have reached out to Main Roads last week. I've yet to receive a response on diagonal diversions in general, but specifically for this intersection, there has been no response from Main Roads or any commentary on this.
Okay. I'm just going to do it. So I guess this is very challenging.
Councillor Gontaszewski, I think you've already
I just want to foreshadow that I would consider moving a deferral to allow, I know I'm just doing it to go through the end of the process, to allow with engagement with Main Roads on in principle support or otherwise for diagonal diversion in this area, and whether a raised plateau could be incorporated into their trial of that infrastructure into this precinct, i.e. whether they would be able to fund that this financial year and use that as part of their trial.
Before we go down that path, I know that Councillor Wallace wanted to speak, and Councillor Castle, so I'd just like to continue to let others speak. Councillor Wallace.
Thanks, Mayor Cole. I didn't have much to say on it. Very supportive of improving pedestrian cyclist safety, generally quite supportive that local roads are for local people. I'm just also aware that, you know, like the consultation process, you know, it could have been done better for sure. But you know, it does seem like an unpopular proposal to me. The speed data doesn't necessarily seem to warrant it. Certainly the volumes are up on what they probably could and should be. So I guess I was going to have a kind of question back to the mover, like what does success look like if we were to proceed with an alternate motion to approve the trial? You know, like given that popularity is already low, speeds are already low, how are we measuring and judging if we were to proceed with a trial, whether it should become permanent?
Are we allowed to just allow questions between council members?
It's a suggestion for a topic of debate during
It might
closure.
be more appropriate
It's
that
not a
if this-
question.
If this becomes, because effectively you're permitting council Oden to speak twice, so I have to kind of try to keep this fair. So
Can you not
if we
speak
get to
twice?
the alternate, perhaps that's the right place for the measures of success to be outlined as part of that, if it gets to that point. Did you have anything else? Did you want to ask any questions or?
No, but I guess I'd probably be supportive of a deferral. I don't know what deferral count we're up to on this items. Must be nearing 10, but
Okay, we'll continue
the
on to
reasons in
councillor
this instance,
Castle.
I believe, may be sound.
Okay, councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. I did have a couple of questions that were mostly covered by councillor Gontaszewski, because I was concerned that the cost of a temporary water-filled barrier was in the similar range to the infrastructure cost that was proposed. So I just want to clarify that that's based on purchasing the barriers, which would therefore mean they would be an asset we could reuse in the future.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. We could use the waterfall barriers for other projects in the future.
I did note that the comment in the report about the risk of main roads not supporting the closure, and I'm just wondering what, do you have any indication of how that may play out? I know that's probably hard to answer, but is your gut feeling that it'll be a no or a yes?
Through the chair, the engineering team through the Osroad guidelines have done a warrant check on current traffic volumes and speeds and the traffic calming that has been implemented in that area. The warrant doesn't score above the 30 score mark. It's around about the 18 to 20 on both streets. So given the warrant scoring, it is unlikely that main roads would support this diversion. The Osroad standards also speak about a temporary closure as the last resort, and generally that the diversional closures are not typically the ones that the treatments for traffic calming. It's down on the list. Basically, it's as the last one to be used. Notwithstanding this, the process would be to do the signs and lines drawing, send it into main roads, and generally to come back with a couple of comments that we incorporate, and then they are approved. However, I just don't have experience myself on this type of submission, so we just need to go through that process.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, because I noted it's in the comment on the potential alternate, that the diagonal road closures is the least preferred option. Is there a hierarchy that you can share that ranks those in terms of most preferred and least preferred, or is it too particular to the situation to be that certain about it?
Through the chair, the Osroad guidelines does have a list of probably 15 to 20 traffic calming options. Each individual street would be assessed independently, so it is hard to judge, but there is that information. The Osroad guideline is, you can Google it, it's public. I can give a copy if you wish as well. So, and yeah, it's really comprehensive document, and that's where we base our technical judgments with these sorts of treatments. It's a guideline, not just for WF, for Australia wide.
Okay, so certainly a tricky one. I have to say, I agree that I don't support a do nothing approach. To be honest, I'm not convinced that the diversion is firstly going to be approved by Main Roads, and secondly is necessarily the best option given those guidelines. But we're not presented with another option to do anything else. So it is difficult to proceed. Having said that, I actually don't support a deferral because I would rather we try something now. And, you know, we're either going to have a month where you go away and try and find out information and then we make a decision, or we make a decision today, we then about a diversion potentially. Main Roads may knock that back and we're back where we started from, but at least we're moving forward with something. So I'm left in a very difficult position where I don't really support the officer recommendation because it doesn't propose a treatment for this intersection, but I'm not necessarily potentially in supportive of a diversion. But that's for me to consider if there's an alternate motion on the table.
Can I just raise again, though, that we've just talked about the diagonal diversion, which plateau, which I think is confusing language, is actually that is an option, a plateau at the location. Manager, can I just ask, I remember seeing a plan for it somewhere, tiny plan in amongst this many attachments. Do you know what page number that was on? Just to draw council members' attention if you are looking for an option.
And through you, Mayor Cole, just for the purposes of clarity, we would support a raised plateau on this intersection. Volume 6 of this series of reports to council, we did previously consult the community on a range of different options for traffic calming. I think we consulted on single lane slow points, chicanes, speed bumps. The overwhelming conclusion of that was that raised plateaus were the most popular, and that has been proven since they've been installed. So we've had very positive feedback around the raised plateaus. That seems to be the one and only thing everyone can agree on in terms of traffic calming in the city of Vincent at the moment, that raised plateaus are a winner. So we absolutely would support after confirming the costs, and we could approach Main Roads installation of it'd be a rectangle raised plateau on that area. So it would be bigger.
Page 46.
Thank you, Matt. Can I ask a question about that? Because I've seen that plan, which is referred to as detail 2, and there's budget estimates for that. But if we wanted to implement that, that would require an amendment to the recommendation. Is that correct?
Through Mayor Cole, if you wanted us to confirm the exact cost, we could bring a report back to council next month to confirm that as a standalone. But that wouldn't, that's a separate decision on the diagonal diversion. And then there's also the 40K proposal in the report as well. So we could certainly, if there's any doubt about the costs or implementation or whether or not we need to
clarify those, CEO, because on page 46, the detailed 2 4-way plateau example, and under financial and budget implications, detailed 2 4-way plateau diversion. I think that's the confusion, that it's not a diversion. Cost ranging from $30,000 to $40,000. So I'm assuming that we have an estimate on a raised plateau in this location. Manager, did you want to add anything to that?
Through the chair, the raised plateaus have been completed last financial year, so we do have actual costs, and we based the cost estimate from previous experience. So yes, we do have that cost, and it's based on similar works that we've delivered last financial year.
And through you, Mayor Cole, just to clarify, we'd much prefer to spend money on a permanent, well-received, popular, supported, proven option than buying some very large plastic items and filling them up with water, not knowing whether or not they'll work and not knowing whether we'll be able to use them again.
Yeah, I suppose to follow on from my question, what I'm asking is, as the recommendation currently reads, if it was passed unamended, it would not include the installation of a raised plateau at that intersection.
No, that would have to be by amendment.
Yes, so we
and I
would
just
have to
clarifying with the manager, that would not be so significant to negate the recommendation. So it could be done by amendment, not by alternate. Councillor, I know you had your hand up, but Councillor Hallett did indicate before you. Have you, Councillor Castle, anything further?
Not at this point. I might move an amendment.
Okay, Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. I actually think this one is a bit more straightforward. Consistently, and one of the reasons I think it's taken 5 years to get through this is that we're consistently provided options for slowing down traffic, and the feedback from community is consistently that's not all we're talking about. We're talking about volume. I don't support a plateau instead of a diagonal diversion. I think the reason diagonal diversion was suggested because it is more drastic, because residents want a drastic response to deal with the volume, particularly the commercial trucks that are accessing Coles. So, yeah, I guess I don't support a deferral. I do support the alternate. I'm not convinced about the Waterfield option, but I would leave the decision about what is actually produced from up to administration. I think it is important that we act on this, and I think a diagonal diversion is a better option. The point is we want to move cars out of this area onto the main streets. That's the point. Another plateau is not going to do that. It's a minor inconvenience that will slow people down, but it will not stop the trucks or move other cars out.
Councillor Oplow, did you wish to ask a question?
Question, yep, just because the conversation moved to options. Can administration just confirm that a raised plateau wouldn't resolve the issue of what the community has said about people driving on the wrong side of the road as they cut through that corner?
Through the chair, a raised plateau would just slow traffic down. Traffic, if it was on the wrong side of the road, can still be on the wrong side of the road. Generally, road rules is driving on the left-hand side of the road, so everybody would obey road rules, but the plateau wouldn't stop anybody from driving anywhere within the road reserve.
Thank you. Question 2: what if a diagonal diversion went forward, and the results of the trial proved that it didn't make any difference? What is the actual cost for removing it? A permanent fixture just to remove it?
Through the chair, through my experience, it would cost anywhere between $10,000 and $15,000 to remove and reinstate what was there previously.
Cool. Thank you.
Councillors, I'll speak to the motion. Look, I do understand that this has been a long-running issue, but I just do want to go back to the point that actions have actually been taken. So at the last time we dealt with this, we made a decision to put in place plateaus, and that was in response to the community consultation. That was definitely the most well-received consensus view from residents, that plateaus were something that was, overwhelmingly compared to the other things we'd looked at, like slow points. There was much more consensus from the community on that. We're also considering tonight a 40km/h proposal. So this idea that we've done nothing, that this has been going on for 5 years, we actually have done something. And we're also considering 40k proposal as well as a diagonal diversion. I do think that when we make these sorts of decisions, we do have to think about equity and fairness, because you do have to ask the question, is this a unique issue? And I think Barbara herself raised that this is not necessarily a unique issue. And has the case been made for this particular street to have this particular treatment? And I think that is still a big question mark when you look at the traffic data. The engineering team do have expertise. They are qualified engineers. They've got a degree, they have the qualifications, and they've done a desktop analysis. And they've looked at the impact on other local roads. So not distributors, but other local roads. So we're talking about trying to slow down and create a less volume on one road, but that shouldn't be to the detriment of other local roads in the same category. When you look at traffic impact assessments, which are done for development and infrastructure planning all the time for various projects, they are based on modelling and forecasting. Not everything is done in real life and measured because you can't. So every time you go to a JDAP meeting and you're dealing with a significant development, or we're planning for ports, or we're doing all these things and looking at the road network, so much of that is based on modelling and forecasting. That tool is a recognised normal approach. Desktop might be less sophisticated than full-blown modelling, but it's a way in which people do traffic impact assessments. In considering the facts, you do have to look at the traffic data, and we don't always measure at every time of year, and there are variables, but we try to do it as evenly as possible by missing things like school holidays and trying to get a true picture. When you look at the average speeds that are sort of in the 35s, 39s, 34s, you do have to actually consider there will be other streets in the City of Vincent that have much higher speeding and volumes. So, we're making this decision on this street, but there are other streets, and I, would say from experience that there are others with higher levels of speeding and volumes. So we do have to also think about the broader context. I do agree that the heavy vehicle numbers have not shifted. In fact, they've gone up a tiny small amount, but they have gone up. And, we're talking about things like residents want this, but really when 77%, like the facts, 77% said they don't support it. 64% of those didn't name their street. And I think that was something that perhaps could have been done better. I think for this one, we probably really did need to know location, but it is the great percentage of that didn't name their street. So we don't have that information, but we do know, based on those 85 people that responded, this is not a popular solution overall. I am worried about the cost and value of spending $30,000 on plastic water-filled barriers, and we don't even know if we've got Main Roads approval to do that. I just think that we do have to acknowledge that this is quite a radical treatment and it will have impact on other local roads. We could go down this path, or we could not. We could make the decision and not be allowed to do it. I would favour the option of the plateau. We've got a costing of $30,000 to $40,000. We do have a miscellaneous budget for these sorts of works, and we hear that we can accommodate this. So I would prefer that we actually keep the treatment consistent, the treatment that has had the greatest support in this location, that we understand that the volumes and the traffic speeds have gone down since those plateaus have gone in, and that we actually spend our money doing a concrete treatment that we know will be broadly supported by the community, rather than spending money on a trial that we either don't know we can do, or we wouldn't spend the money if we can't do it. But, we don't know if we can do this trial, and we don't know that it's going to be supported by the community, because the indication to date is that when we've asked the community, do they want this, 77% have said that they don't. So I'm going to support, if it comes forward, going with the addition of the plateau, because I agree with Councillor Gontaszewski that it is odd that there's no treatment at this intersection. I think that's because it was earmarked for this discussion with the community, but we should have had the backup option when we went out to the community that said, would you like to trial a diagonal diversion, or would you like the same treatment that you've had at your other intersections, which is the raised plateau? We didn't ask that question, we should have done, but I think that based on previous consultation, we do know that the plateaus are broadly supported by the community. I am concerned when we do these sorts of radical treatments that we do impact other local roads, and that's the concern. So that's where I'm sitting with this. Councillor Castle.
I'd like to move an amendment, and I would be grateful for some help with wording. I don't need to look at the actual substantive to work that out. Essentially, I'd like to move an amendment, if I have a seconder, to implement the plateaus we've been discussing at the intersection of Alma and Leek. happy to, do we need wording first, or perhaps someone is happy to?
I think the executive
Second
manager
that.
of governance wishes to assist.
Thank you, Mayor. Perhaps it would be that we leave point 2 in the original motion as not proceeds, and then a new point 3, which is proceeds with a 4-way construction of a 4-way plateau on the intersection of Leake Street and Almas Road North.
Is there a seconder for the amendment?
Well,
Seconded by councillor Wallace. Do you wish to speak to the amendment?
Look, just briefly, I mean, obviously there's a variety of views around the chamber, and it may not be that if people are prepared to support this at this point, but I would prefer to have a substantive on the table that has an option presented, so that whatever happens with that substantive, we're not left with nothing. If substantive fails and the alternate fails, then we would be left with nothing. So I think that there's several points in the substantive that are not up for debate, the 40K trial in particular. So it's really just making sure that whatever happens tonight, there is some treatment proposed for this intersection. And I think for the reasons that I discussed earlier, I'm not confident about a diagonal diversion being approved or being the right option here.
Councillor Wallace, do you just speak to it? Councillor Gontaszewski.
Just in relation to the financial implications, I know that the city has budget for the implementation of the 40-kilometre-an-hour trial. And I'd just like to get an understanding of what the current budget is for this miscellaneous bucket and how much of it would be taken up by this. Or is that the approach, is that particular capital works item would be funded out of the miscellaneous bucket, and then that potentially topped up at another point later in the year, should we have the financial capacity? We're spending extra money, what are we foregoing is my key question.
Through the chair, there is a bucket of money for local area traffic management. The exact amount, I don't have them figures in front of me, but I do believe that the cost of raised plateaus and 40-kilometre-an-hour speed reduction or any ancillary works associated with this can be covered within that bucket of money. It's a new financial year, so I don't believe we've used much of it, if any, but I would need to just check on the exact figures, that's all.
Councillors, any further comments on the amendment? Councillor Opolo.
Thanks, Mayor. Look, it's a difficult one to vote on because like if the amendment, the motion, sorry, that Councillor Castle's proposed would be my second option. I think I prefer the Loden one. So even if we take a vote on this now and I vote against, I would actually prefer that option better than the one that's on the table by administration. So it's hard to know how to vote knowing that there's so many motions on the table, but I'm just clarifying
You're dealing with the one now. So what would happen if you can, sometimes you can vote for an amendment just so that the substantive changes as a second preference.
Yes.
And then when it comes to the actual item itself, the way you choose might be to vote against it, but it means that the substantive is preferable to what you would have been voting against. It's a bit of a moot point, but there's no harm in voting for the amendment if you prefer that to the existing substantive, even if you decide not to vote for it in the end.
Okay.
Look, I will support it. I think it's a pragmatic approach. I think that we're spending money on an actual intervention. I'm not going to repeat myself because I think most of the comments I said before apply, but I support the amendment.
So before we vote, is this did you propose, I missed it. Is this motion that we're about to vote a trial or just to do it? To do it. Okay, thanks.
Okay, is there any further comments on the amendment? Okay, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? The amendment is carried with Councillor Hallett voting against. You can vote against. I don't call that yet. Councillor Hallett voting against. So now we're dealing with the substantive motion which includes a raised plateau at the intersection. Is there anyone who hasn't spoken on the motion that wishes to speak or any further questions? Councillor Loden, you wish to close debate?
Thank you, Mayor. Healthy debate on this one tonight. So I support the plateau because that is marginally better, but that fundamentally does not address the issue of traffic volume. I note the point that this might not be the most highest need place in the city for this issue, but it is the issue that is in front of us, and it is the issue that we will be facing in all of our precincts. As we see increased density along our corridors, there's going to be more and more cars on our back streets. And the sooner we start getting in front of this and starting to address this through each of the precincts, the better. Otherwise, this is going to be more and more problematic as we go forward, because people will expect that this is the way that they get around, that they get around through their local streets rather than using our main distributors, rather than using the main roads, which are there, they're intended for. And we'll have more and more community concerns about this, because the only way they can get through the city is through people's, through the local streets that we have. So I feel like it's really important that we need to progress this, that we need to take some action here. A raised plateau won't address the fundamental issue. It's marginally better, but it does not address the fundamental issue of traffic volume in this street. Thank you.
That has closed debate. So I will now put the substantive motion as amended. All those in favour? All those against? Which way are you voting, Councillor Apollo? Okay, so can I just have those against raise their hands again?
Sorry, could I ask a question?
It's very difficult because I've already called for the vote.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask what we were voting on.
Oh, okay. So we're voting on the substantive motion. It has been amended. So it's not that piece of yellow paper that you have in front of you. We haven't got to that yet. What needs to happen is that we first deal with this motion. If this fails, then this one can be put. So we're dealing with the recommendation effectively from administration with the addition of the plateau at the cost of $30,000 to $40,000. Okay, so I'm going to put the vote again. All those in favour of the substantive motion as amended? That's 4 in favour. All those against? That's 5 against. The motion is lost. Is there an alternate motion? Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Mayor. I've kind of talked to this by association, so I won't go over it again.
Sorry, I have to call for a seconder.
Oh, yeah.
Councillor Warner.
Thank you. So this is basically to proceed with the diagonal diversion. Councillor Apollo did ask a good question around whether you could make this permanent, and then if you decided to pull it out, I'm open to that as an option as well. I'll put forward this one, but I'm happy for it to be amended if that's the way people want to move. I put it as a 6-month trial rather than a 12-month trial because I believe we can get sufficient information. It doesn't give you a full year's worth of data, but you do pick up 2 school holidays in that period of time. Assuming we can move relatively quickly, we'll get Christmas as well. So we should get a good bunch of data to give us really clear indication of what's happening with traffic flows at that time. If this is really, really problematic as well, then it is 6 months of diversion rather than a full year. So it's not impacting the community as much, but making sure that we can get good quality information to help inform a future decision around making this permanent. Thank you.
Councillor Warner.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Loden. Basically, I think we really need to be addressing the commercial vehicles, etc., that we are dealing with here, and I think this is the way to do it. I support a 6-month trial on this. I accept that it's also subject to determination with Main Roads WA. So obviously we're still yet to go down that rabbit warren, but I really support this amendment. Thank you.
Councillors, Councillor Uplow or Councillor Hallett, you can come next.
Yeah, obviously I support the thrust of this as the option. My question to administration is going back to the briefing that there's no cheaper, like if we're doing a permanent fixture here, even though it's a trial, I think you said that all the upfront costs would be the same if it was a 6 or 12-month trial. I just want to confirm that.
Through the chair, yes, if it was built of concrete, brick paving, soft landscaping, that the cost is going to stay the same. Yep.
So my question would be, to administration, wouldn't it be better to keep it at 12 months so that if after 6 months we didn't get enough data and it was borderline as to, whether we do it, this would just end and we might come to an inconclusive result. If it remained at 12 months, and this is my question, even if at that point there was sufficient evidence to say even after 6 months that it's good, wouldn't administration just come back to us and say, we've actually got enough empirical data and we can stop the trial, we just leave it as permanent? So I don't see the benefit. My question to administration is, I don't know if there's a benefit to reduce the trial period to 6 months, because we can pivot as and when we get enough data anyway.
Through the chair, 12 months would give more data. But yeah, we could do a 6-month trial, 12-month trial. If it's made of concrete and brick paving and soft landscaping, I would see no reason why we couldn't do the 12-month trial. And if it was successful, we could potentially keep it in place.
Well, I'm supporting this, but if there was a preference in the room to keep it at 12 months, that would be my option.
Councillor Castle.
I just want to ask a follow-up question to that in relation to the options available to administration and council if we are seeing a really clear trend either in the positive or the negative before the end of, say, 12 months or at 6 months. If the council decision is for a 12-month trial, are we bound to continue that for the entire 12 months, or there would be an option to bring that back to council to finish it early? I guess my concern, and the reason I ask that question, is if things are going great, everything's fine. But if things are going badly, which has been the concern of administration, what would be the process to finish the trial early?
Through Mayor Cole, I'm assuming councillors would hear faster than we would if this wasn't popular by residents, and that you'd hear directly from them before we did. And then the residents could do what the residents did 4 or 5 years ago, which is put a petition to council asking for a change to the traffic management arrangements in North Perth.
Through the chair.
Sorry. Yes, Executive Manager, go ahead.
Sorry, Mayor. If we did see some significant negative trends or safety issues arising as a consequence of it, of that diversion, the engineering team would alert council and we'd address it as soon as possible, potentially by an urgent report through to council.
Okay, so regardless of what time we agree on today, there's always the options to come back and amend that to council. My question is also, in previous reports, there's been talk of a minimum of 6 weeks. What would be, if we are having a diversion, what is administration's preferred timeframe for that?
Through the chair, 12 months is obviously ideal to get as much data as we can. 6 months, 3 months. Generally, you'd want that 6-week period just to get enough data. It would be unfavorable to do it any shorter. That's just the engineering team's view. So yeah, we could be open to as short as 6 weeks, but if it is constructed of concrete, brick paving, soft landscaping, I would see no issues by extending that to 6-12 months or even longer if it was successful.
Councillor Gontaszewski.
Thank you. Just a quick question. So I note from the budget papers that there is I believe, $58,000 or so in relation to this traffic management. So it does appear that there is options to implement and the solutions proposed. So I guess my understanding from the wording of this motion is that it doesn't prescribe a particular implementation method. So should this diversion be approved, administration would use would implement the most, I guess, financially prudent way of implementing the diversion, considering the cost. Like, is the intention, given that there is a budget, to implement a more permanent solution upfront, or is the current proposal in relation to the hiring of the barriers, or does council need to specify in the motion?
Through the chair, the diagonal diversion is typically through the Oz Road standards built off concrete, soft landscaping, brick paving. That would be our preferred recommendation. The concept design was originally proposed to fit that scope of works. Through the detailed design, we would be able to do a more detailed design and not out the details with a firm cost and what that looks like.
Okay, thank you. Look, I will, I don't support a do nothing option, so I will support this item.
Councillors, question?
Sorry, I have one more question. Given that we've had a discussion already that there's potential for Main Roads not to approve this diversion, what will be the next step if it's denied? Will we just get a report back next month saying go ahead with that plateau?
Through the chair, a plateau is one of the more preferred options through the Oz Road guidelines. Notwithstanding if the diagonal diversion was supported or not, we are working with Main Roads quite closely with other projects, similar traffic calming situations around the city of Vincent, with the overall goal of, creating the safer streets as per their strategic plans. The 40km/h speed reduction in North Perth, we will be presenting that to Main Roads as a formal application. And again, we're still in negotiations with Main Roads and several other projects that, traffic calm to the entire city of Vincent. So yes, we are talking to Main Roads on several of these projects moving forward.
Okay, but just to clarify, this would require another decision of council to actually do something in that intersection if Main Roads is not supportive of
Perhaps
this
I can
outcome.
help on that. I think that council could consider a fifth clause that says, should Main Roads WA not approve the diagonal diversion trial, administration to progress the implementation of the four-way plateau at the intersection of blah blah.
Is that something that then would be actionable by administration without needing to come back to council? Okay, well, I'd be happy to move that amendment. That's to add clause 5, which says what the mayor just said.
Should Main Roads WA not approve the diagonal diversion trial, administration to progress the implementation of the four-way plateau at the intersection of Elmer Road and Lake Street. Is there a seconder for the amendment? Seconded by Councillor Wallace. Do you wish to speak to the amendment?
Only to say we need to move, and rather than have to wait to come back to council again, at least we'll be making progress.
Councillor Wallace, you seconded.
Yeah, strongly support this. The less council items that deal with traffic issues and parking issues, better from my perspective. So
Thank
cutting
you.
a potential one out is strongly supported.
Councillor Apollo.
Just on the question about getting approval from Main Roads, if we did what we're suggesting here and it was approved under a trial, if we then decide it has to become permanent, do you have to reapply? Is there a difference in their approval between a trial and a permanent solution?
Through the chair, we would need to go through that process. Would be very similar processes in a trial or a permanent application. My experience would be generally we would apply through the signs and lines. And if the signs and lines drawings was approved by Main Roads, then we would need to go through the process. But my experience wouldn't call for a second approval from Main Roads. So generally just a one approval from Main Roads is required.
Yeah, because where I'm confused is what's the significance, because we're putting in a permanent feature which can be removed. What's the significance of calling it a trial? I mean, I know that we do it because even if we put a permanent solution in, calling it permanent, and it doesn't work and we decide to remove it, I'm just trying to understand if there's any significance that we attach to the word trial.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I think that just provides us with a trigger point to do that review and come back to council. So there's a time frame, a definite loop of when we do the review and bring back a report to council on whether or not to keep it or remove it.
Just for Wendy's benefit, just so that this has a action word in the amendment, it should read, should Main Roads WA not approve the diagonal diversion trial, comma, council approves administration to progress, etc. It doesn't change the intent in any way. It just adds council approves, if that's okay, to the move and seconder.
Sorry, one other question on the same. So if they don't approve the diagonal, then we still need approval for the plateau.
No, we are saying as part of this resolution, don't come back to council again, just move forward with option.
No.
The majority is option 2, which is the plateau.
Yeah, my question is, should the wording of the motion say ask for approval for the plateau? In the second.
We don't need to ask Main Roads approval for a plateau.
We don't. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hallett.
Just a question. I guess my concern is whether or not we're going to be doing a robust advocacy to Main Roads for a diagonal diversion if we're including alternative options. And so I guess I'm curious, how would the conversation with Main Roads differ with the existing motion versus having also a discussion about a plateau?
Can I just say, like, if there's a resolution of council that says, this is the resolution of council, you go to Main Roads and this is what you do. And if Main Roads independently says no, then this is a second, like we have to have faith that we're making a resolution and the administration under the Local Government Act has to follow that resolution. So you have to go into this thinking that this is a resolution of council. We've given the instructions to the administration. If they cannot, if Main Roads makes their own mind, which they are the approver, then this is option 2. I just think it's as simple as that.
Through Mayor Cole, my experience is Main Roads of all state government agencies are the least emotional about these things, and they are 100% technical, and they'll provide a technical and emotional view on whether or not they support that. Regardless of how nicely Luke asks for it, they'll give the response that they do from a purely 100% technical view with no emotional attachment to it.
So we're still on the amendment. Are there any other comments on the amendment before I put the amendment? Okay, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? All those against? Councillor Hallett voting against. Okay, we're back to the substantive motion as amended. Anyone who hasn't spoken wish to speak to this? You have an amendment.
So basically my amendment is also to clarify that if under that same one around Mains Roads, that if the diagonal diversion is not approved, so I'm happy to go with the raised plateau, but also that administration will identify other options to address vehicle movement in the precinct, or words to that effect, to sort of say, because we still have not addressed the issue of traffic volume.
Is there a seconder for the amendment?
And sorry, and I'll also add in to change my own amendment to make it a 12-month trial, recognising that admin will bring it short if it's really problematic.
Is there a seconder for the amendment to add the new clause requiring additional options from administration to deal with volume of traffic and to increase the trial to 12 months? So was someone seconding that? Ross? Well, how does that help? I know this, but I don't think these people are.
So Wendy, I'd say requests administration to identify additional options to address traffic volume in the precinct and provide a report back to council with recommended solutions.
The CEO just wanted to, can we just wait till I get a seconder for this and then I'll go to you, CEO? Is there a seconder for this
Sorry,
amendment?
recommended options.
Seconded by Councillor Warner. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Loden? Councillor Warner? Councillors, does anyone wish to speak to this?
Yeah, I don't. If someone in the room can explain to me what 3 is actually trying to achieve, because if we're saying that our first option is diagonal diversion, and if that's not permitted, then the second option is to do the plateau, which we spoke about. I'm not sure where 3 actually fits in. If I can get clarity from somebody.
Sorry, that's a good point, Councillor Ipolo. This was supposed to be if the diagonal diversion is not approved by Main Roads. Yeah. No, so I'm happy for us to do the plateau. So we already have the plateau. I'm saying we can do a plateau, but we still need to address the issue of traffic volume. So it maybe in front of requests or after requests, say requests if diagonal diversion is not approved by Main Roads with Councillor Warner's approval. Version is not approved, administration. Thanks.
Okay, so the mover and seconder have had their say or decided not to. Does anyone else wish to speak to this amendment? I'd just like to speak against this amendment because the community consultation has shown 77% do not want the diagonal diversion. I think that having 6 months was at least a nod to the community to say we heard you and we were going to half the time for those that did not want this treatment. I think that the clause 3 adding a request to administration to come up with yet further options, that for me lacks absolute finality. I think that we should really just be making the call that if the diagonal diversion is outside of the City of Vincent's hands and Main Road says no, what other possible options that we haven't already looked at are there left? I'm sorry, but that's just, I don't know what is left to consider. And I just think that we are trying tonight to put a final option to basically bring this to final conclusion for the time being. Obviously, traffic management will come up again in the future, but for this particular round, I just think that just drags it out yet again. We've considered slow points, we've considered plateaus, we've considered 40 kilometres. The diagonal diversion is the solution to stop through traffic. If it is not possible, what else is left? Please, can we just have some, can we just consider where we've come from and where we're going with this? Councillor Alexander.
Sorry, I'll support the 6 months and a plateau.
Well, then you will
I'm
not
not-
be voting in favour of this amendment,
I
just to be
won't be,
clear.
no.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Uplow.
Just a question. I thought there was a second option here if the diagonal didn't get approved by Main Roads, that the plateau was going to, we were
We've
going.
dealt with that.
But it's not
and
in
that-
there.
That is already forms part of the substantive motion. This is a fresh amendment with 2 further clauses that we are discussing.
So we can't see the whole thing. Okay, all right, I'll trust you.
This is just the amendment. The second amendment. Okay, I'm going to put the amendment. All those in favour? All those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The amendment is lost. We're back to the substantive. Any further comments, or can I please put this substantive motion? Okay, I'm putting the substantive motion. Councillor Wallace.
I was just going to get one last comment in for the silent majority, 77%. Like, I'm still not sure what parameters we're going to judge the success or failure of this thing on. You know, if 77% are against it now, do we need 90% of people voting against this to roll it back? But I guess we'll come to that at the end of the trial period. I do actually support this. Something needs to be done at this intersection. My preferred option of the plateau went back. I'm just going to vote.
Well, I was just going to vote on it, but you have prompted me to raise. I do think there are risks for the city involved in this proposal, because the cost estimate to do the brick paved curbed trial is $35,000 to $60,000. We've heard it's $15,000 to remove that if it's goes to the 90% that then don't want it, who knows? And then there's nothing in place. So when we're talking about budgets and we're talking about restraint, I'm just really raising that as an issue, and I do not support this motion. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. Wendy, can you please bring the full substantive motion as amended up on the screen? We've just had that, Councillor Apollo, and it's been voted against. Okay, so all those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. All those against? That's 3 against. I declare the motion carried. We can move on. Okay, we move on then to item 9.6, advertising of amended policy, local planning policy number 7.5.1, minor nature development. Councillor Gontaszewski, you raised this. No, I have a seconder for this motion, please. Seconder for the item, Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. I raised this because I just have to have the opportunity to get it right in my head as to what we're going out on to consult with people about, and also how we're going to consult. In my line of questions relate to the proposal to no longer require a development application for events on public land or private land that occur at a particular frequency. So that everything else totally cool with. Just in relation to the, sorry, just want to go to the individual report item. All right. So I just want to clarify, if someone wanted to hold an event on city land, public land, a regular event, but that was lower than the proposed frequency, they would still need to put in an event application form. And that would be assessed by the city. there would be no need to undertake community consultation. There'd be no mandatory requirement to undertake community consultation, but that people would get a notification should the city undertake their assessment and issue an approval. There would be a notification. And that would be the same with events on private land, that there would be no community consultation, but that the city technical officer would do an assessment, and that assessment would consider things like amenity impacts that relate to scale. Okay. Does the policy contain provisions that would trigger the city to require, or, you know, is the city, what's the threshold of impact and intensity of use within that 12 hours once a week, not including setup or pack down, that the city might see the need to engage with the local community and see how they would be impacted, or is it always just going to be a technical assessment based on certain criteria?
Through the Mayor. So there are proposed conditions, and one of those conditions would be where it's not of a high scale impact or intensity. So for instance, if a community group was having a regular event and that event, while currently exempt, started to create issues in the neighbourhood, and that might be in the realm of parking or noise and things like that, there would be the ability for us to say any future events would require development approval, and we will need to consider an application if we're seeing impacts. If, for instance, they wanted to have, so at the moment it's 12 consecutive hours or less in any 1 week period. If they wanted to have twice a week a after school fair or something like that, then we would be calling that in.
Yeah, okay. So I guess I understand that there is the specified quantitative provision within the policy in relation to the time, and that is kind of what is used as the key benchmark as to whether you need a development approval and require public consultation versus that you don't need a development approval and the community is just notified once administration has done an approval. I think on the one hand, I'm supportive of this item because I do applaud the city's efforts to try and get the settings right in relation to development applications. And I do recognise that the work that the city does internally to undertake a number of technical assessments as opposed to when you're considering an event application, I absolutely do. However, I do feel that the thing that this is resulting in is potential for increased impacts on community and decreased transparency and engagement with community. And so I note that this is an approval to go out to consultation. And so I guess I've looked at the report in terms of how the city is intending to engage with the community. And I have some concerns that that particular issue around how the community feels about getting less consultation on these type of issues is going to be challenging to obtain information on through the sort of standard consultation process. And I'm wondering if administration have any thoughts as to whether this consultation process could be modified or teased out somehow to talk to residents that may be adjacent to public spaces that have had events in the past and could look at an increasing frequency of events through this process, or perhaps even private venues or people within businesses that operate in those areas, as to try and tease out, perhaps with a view to putting in some more definitive provisions rather than just the 12 hours around impact, amenity, etc., that would drive something towards a consultation process versus a notification process.
Through the Mayor, I think pick up on what your point is. And I think what I would say is that this policy is intending to set some parameters around events, because at the moment it's pretty unregulated, and it basically says in the state planning regulations that you can have events up to 48 hours across 12 months without any approval requirements. So the purpose of these provisions is to define what we consider an acceptable standard. I do think that through the consultation period, and when this does come back to council, what we could look at is defining that high scale, because I think you've touched on that that's not very clear on what we're considering high scale other than the time limited. So I do think the intensity needs to be considered, and we should add some parameters around that. Through the consultation, I definitely think that there is merit in going to looking at what our approvals have been, and particularly those ones where we're issuing consistent approvals, so on particular reserves at the moment, and doing more intensive consultation, and we can work with marketing about how we would actually do that, because that probably sits a little bit outside how planning usually does consultation. So we can definitely take some direction on that, and I think that that might address some of the concerns that you have, and we can definitely work through that high scale definition as we go through consultation.
And just in addition, through the mayor, I think we can circulate that to council members as well, the proposed consultation, to see that much better than us which communities are affected by the current events and who you think should be consulted in the House. So we'll consult with you before we hit go on that.
Thank you. I really do appreciate that. And I guess I think that would be useful. And I note that there was sort of some preliminary consultation that was done prior to formal consultation on our signs and advertising policy. And I sort of don't know how that was run, but that did seem to sort of inform the development of the policy. But yeah, look, ultimately supportive of this policy direction. Just think it's really important we get the settings right, and that we don't cut the community out of the decision-making process, because we can do all the technical assessments in the world, but one of the reasons we talk to community is to assess the impact to them in their local areas. So supportive of this item, but I suspect we may have some tweaks to this policy as a result of the consultation. So thank you.
The seconder?
Nothing to add.
Nothing to add. Does anyone else wish to discuss? Councillor Uplow?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question about this potential exemption for temporary viewing platforms. So this is where I understand a development application has been approved, and that this would mean that someone could erect a temporary platform to show the view of the potential development. My concern about not getting approval for this is that there doesn't seem to be any restriction or time limit defining what temporary means. And if a development application can be 3 to 5 years before someone can finish it, I wouldn't want this temporary thing overlooking my property, where people looking into my backyard, for example, without some time limit about how long this could be. And is that if I'm reading this correctly, if we vote for this, is that a potential outcome?
Yeah, so through the mayor, in the exemption table, we're proposing conditions that would require, 1, that you needed to have a valid planning approval, and 2, that it's only erected for a maximum of 3 months from the date that the building permit's been issued for the temporary platform.
Apologise, I missed that. Thank you for clarifying.
Councillors, anything further on this item? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? I declare that carried unanimously. Next item is item 9.7. Advertising of new policy, restricted premises, smoking policy. Moved by Councillor Hallett, seconded by Councillor Gontaszewski.
Thank you, Mayor. This is an important initiative that puts into practice the public health leadership that is a central pillar of our public health plan. Tobacco remains a leading cause of death and is an insidious industry that kills more than 1 in 2 of those who consume its products, exactly as the manufacturer advises. Removal of opportunities for this industry to market its products have been removed in a range of ways through other tiers of government, and this policy enables us to bolster our local planning policies to reduce these opportunities further. This is an industry that lost its social license a long time ago, and everything we do to minimise exposure to this harmful product saves lives.
Short and succinct. Councillor Gontaszewski.
Thank you to Councillor Hallett for those words. I completely agree. And I think this is another way that we're tracking through delivery towards all the objectives of our public health plan. And that's something that the city and its officers are doing a fantastic job at.
Councillor Castle, did you wish to speak? No. Councillors, anything further? Councillor Palou?
I asked a question at briefing, thanks Mayor, about vaping, and I just wanted, because I agree and support this agenda item and administration's recommendation, what they're putting forward, but I just wanted to, I was confused at the answer at briefing as to whether vaping would be included in this.
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. The short answer is yes. So there's lots of different land uses, but the short answer is yes, it's covered.
Also, just to add, thank you for the briefing notes, because I did give you the challenge of where could a restricted premises of this type be incorporated, and then you did provide a long list of uses like betting agencies, taverns, other places that probably have their own public health issues. You could have a few little, but thank you very much. So you have demonstrated that we can accommodate despite the additional sensitive uses. Anything further on this one? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? I declare that carried unanimously. Item 9.8, Place Plan Annual Review. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded by Councillor Castle. Councillor Gontaszewski.
I'm supportive of the officer recommendation.
Sorry, Mayor, I was talking over you. Could you remind me what item we're on now?
Yes, it is 9.8 Place Plan Annual Review. It's been moved by Councillor Gontaszewski, who's given her briefest moving in the history of council meetings. And I mean it in a compliment, you know, that's fine. Don't be so sensitive. And seconded by Councillor Castle, who's about to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. I feel like that's laying down a challenge.
No, not at all.
I'm also supportive of the officer recommendation and just wanted to add thanks to the place team. There's a huge amount of work that goes into these place plans because they cover all of our town centres across the entire city. They are informed by a number of different underlying and subsidiary strategies and plans. And I think that this has been a really successful way for us to bring together a lot of different aspects of what we're trying to achieve in these town centres. Councillors, questions, comments? Councillor Alexander.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I have a range of comments and issues, and also sent through asking for some amendments, but they're not as I expected, and I got some information on that at about 6:40 tonight. So I just wanted to ask some questions, given that some of these plans were put in place in 2016, and there's been various annual reviews in that time. And I think sometimes a lot of things change in that period of time. And also some councillors come and go, and some councillors have new views and new ideas. And given that this document is 134 pages long and is a major document and a significant document, you know, I think that it actually requires us to be led through it, to lead through some of what the changes are going to be, what the costs may or may not be, what councillors' opinions on some of the things proposed or some of the amendments might be. And I've got to say, I found it incredibly difficult to follow with all the acronyms, the numerous documents that you were asked to reference these without any reference points, no chapters, no page numbers, and we're largely not in possession of the documents we're asking to be referred to. So if you wanted me to enter a minefield where I felt unprepared to not support without actually going through things, you know, step by step and asking about the amendments and asking about the changes and asking about the situations. So, you know, I really would like to see this deferred to a special meeting. And even if it was just a special meeting for perhaps people that haven't been exposed to this since 2016, you know, I just think given, you know, I expect there'd be millions of dollars involved in a range of these projects, that, you know, a need to go through, you know, all of these some in a quick manner, some in questioning, and some questioning, you know, what the changes are and what the needs for them are, given there's new technologies and new situations that arrive, you know, over a period of 6+ years. So I'm not sure whether the First Amendment is seeking a deferral given the quantum of information and the reading and the research required to understand this, or whether I go to what was my Amendment 2, which was questions about the place plans that I have, or question 3 about some of the wayfinding parts of the project, or question or Amendment 4 regarding some of the issues with Grosvenor Road and, you know, what certain businesses have had to say to me and also certain residents. So I'd take, I guess, the Mayor's advice.
Well, that's
and-
really your call. They're being prepared for you to decide whether you wish to put them, and then council will, you know, either on a procedural motion, there's no debate. So it would just be that you would put that and then I'd put it to the vote. But on the other 2 amendments, you know, you would put that, if it's seconded, then we can debate those amendments.
Okay, well, I think probably the easiest way is I would certainly like to be part of council that actually got led through these, so I could genuinely understand what the advantages and the pros and cons are, and what the consultations have been, and how much money is committed, and how much money is committed to any potential changes. So, you know, the first motion that I would seek would then be the grey one, which people have in there.
Before you put that, can I just say that special council meetings are usually reserved for pretty special purposes? Like, does it need to be a special council meeting? For example, would you be happy to discuss this at a workshop and that it come back to a further council meeting? Just a special council meeting is a additional council meeting called for specific purposes.
Yeah, okay, Mayor Cole, I'll take your advice on, a workshop, I just want to have the time to actually understand it.
Or perhaps then, if you're open to it, it would be that the item be deferred to a council workshop to consider and a future council meeting to approve. Yep.
And can I say I appreciated John Corbellini's long email, and I'm sure Tara's work as well.
Just because this cannot be debated, sometimes in these situations, council members foreshadow that they wish to defer, and that is an opportunity for me to ask other council members if they wish to speak before a deferral on the item. Would you like me to open this up to other councillors to see if they wish to speak before you move the deferral on the substantive motion, or do you wish to move the deferral?
No, certainly I'll go with your advice on, more than
Well,
expect other councillors to
that's
speak.
something that we did write into our meeting procedures, that we give up before deferral outright. We give the opportunity for other councillors to speak to the substantive first.
Yep.
So if you're happy with that, I can then come back to you.
Certainly.
Yeah. Okay. Does anyone wish to speak to the item prior to it being deferred? Councillor Loden.
Just to say that I'd be supportive of a deferral. I'm happy to have some further dialogue and conversation about this. And I fully appreciate that I've had a lot more longevity. I've seen all of these coming out and to have to put your mouth over the fire hose in one hit is a big undertaking. And I'd also say that, it warrants fresh pair of eyes and for us to look at these things again as a holistic point of view. You like my my analogy there? Yeah, yeah, yeah. But, cheers.
I missed it. What was the analogy?
Like putting your mouth over a fire hose.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
right. Councillors, any further comments before you go back to, yes, councillor Wallace?
I just wanted to know if admin wanted to, there was a comment that it would not have any operational impact on the city. Is it simply that straightforward, or is there any more detail that you'd want to give there?
It's through you, Mayor Cole. This annual review really is about taking the decisions that councillors made recently, like the budget and, you know, the decision about Grosvenor Road last meeting, etc., and updating all these plans so that they reflect the current council position. That's really the main thing that's been done. So we're very, so there would be no operational impact on delaying that. And we're very keen to have a conversation in detail around all of the aspects so that that can inform maybe further changes to these plans. And the reviews, we've got all the council members' views included in this document. So yeah, we're very supportive of that.
Can I also just raise with administration, we've got proposed amendments sitting on the table here, which to me read more like rescission motions. And I just think administration needs to be mindful of advice when dealing with items as an amendment that are items that council already has a resolution. This is a bit more complex than I think what you've put back to Councillor Alexander, because to action the removal of the pedestrian Grosvenor Road pedestrian space is actually a rescission of a council resolution. And I also haven't looked into it in detail, potentially on the move as well. So we just need to tighten that advice back to council members on these items. Councillor Alexander, do you wish to put, sorry, is everyone okay to move the procedural motion? Please go ahead, Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. That the item be deferred to a council workshop to consider and approve the place.
Just because we don't approve at council workshop, so to a council workshop to consider and a future council meeting to approve.
That's it.
Yes, the place plans. Can I have a seconder for the procedural motion? Okay, I'll put the procedural motion. All those in favour? That's been carried unanimously and that item has been deferred for further discussion. Okay, that takes us to infrastructure and environment. So item 10.1, tender IE 181 of 2022, water ingress works to the facade at Beatty Park Leisure Centre, moved by Councillor Gontaszewski, seconded by Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. I will endeavour to be brief again. Just a question. Thank you for the update to the report and the recommendation. I guess I just had a question that in terms of what this notes a shortfall in the budgeted capital works allocation for this project, and that additional funds would be sourced through mid-year review. And I guess my question is, at what threshold would the city be not recommending that we proceed to reviewing something at mid-year review, and that that we need to make a decision there and then in relation to whether to proceed or not with project? Should we get cost overruns? I'm asking because I suspect this is not the first time we're going to see this in the coming years.
Through the chair, I think it will be on a case-by-case situation. The property management framework's been developed to have some trigger points in respect to the administration reporting back to council in respect to potential cost overruns. That would be used as a guide. And in looking at each of the projects, the city would look at the priority of that project to proceed. So it could be an issue where we're doing works to address a safety or risk issue that we need to manage. So short answer is it depends on a case-by-case basis, but the property management framework would be our major guide to a report. project management framework would be the primary guide for us to report back to council on each of those issues.
Okay, thank you. I will revert to that document. But in future, I do note this is a minor amount and I have every confidence that can be sourced and it's early in the financial year. But thank you for the changes to the report. It's I guess that's more in line with what my expectation is that we see in these sort of documents in future.
Councillor Wallace, councillors, okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Declare that carried. Item 10.3, advertising of amended policy 2.1.3, graffiti control and removal. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Moved by councillor Wallace, seconded by councillor Castle.
I'm generally supportive. I don't have much to say, just moved it because I'm aware there's an amendment on the table.
I'll go to the seconder, councillor Castle.
Thanks. I'm happy to move the amendment on the blue, I suppose that is.
Is there a seconder for the amendment? Seconded by councillor Hallett.
I don't wish to speak other than to say I support it.
Okay, councillor Hallett, do you wish to speak to the amendment?
Only that I support it. Laneways are emerging significantly as streetscapes, and I think we need to be ensuring that that's taken into account in the visual amenity.
Councillors? Look, I put this forward. I do live on a laneway. I did ask the CEO if that's an impartiality interest. He said that it wasn't for this purpose, but just so that you know, and I have seen the impact of having graffiti removal on the laneway preventing further graffiti. And I am, experiencing the streetscape emerging, not as much as some of our many other laneways. I was thinking of laneways like Nova Lane in North Perth, where there's curbing, lighting, tree planting. There's a lot of love going into laneways as people actually fronting out to them, growing vegetation. The city in some cases is able to, do some improvements, although we still don't have sufficient money on the budget for our laneways, I believe, going to become a pressing issue over time. So I think this is really about saying that where you've actually got an emerging streetscape, if then there's no graffiti removal consideration, that really does put a bit of a Debbie Downer on residents and the city's attempts to actually make those really nice secondary streetscapes as we densify in the city of Vincent. So I'd encourage you to support this so that people who live on laneways don't feel like they're not getting the same level of service. Any further comments, councillor Alexander?
I think at the briefing we talked about it also, and I think this is included, I'm just double checking, like as you're driving past, you look down the laneway.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
So administration did respond to our feedback at the briefing, and they made some amendments during the week, and that was included so that if you can visually see the graffiti from the street, that will be removed. And this was just a tweaking of the wording that they had added around laneways with houses fronting the laneway. Any further comments, councillor Oplow?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm supportive of this amendment, but I have a question to administration about the inclusion of the words as determined by the city. So obviously the community would rely on Vincent policy to have an understanding about what is allowed and what's permitted. Is it common in all our policies that they are ultimately at the discretion of the city?
I actually added that wording as part of my amendment because I thought you can have the odd case where, because it wasn't as prescriptive as the previous wording, that where a resident says under the policy, this is negatively impacting on the visual amenity from my property, but clearly, that's way down around the corner and it's not really within the scope of the policy. It just means that the city can actually say, well, look, I'm sorry, but that's not the reasonable interpretation. I'm happy for the words to be removed, but it just might lead to some, I was trying to sort of help the city in those odd cases of unreasonable requests that do come up from time to time. If you don't like the wording, you can move an amendment to remove it.
Not if we could just have administration's view on specifically on those words, because then it can be subjective. The interpretation of policy could be entirely subjective to at the mercy of administration. And I'm just wondering if that's something that's specific just to this one or everything, and whether they're comfortable with the inclusion of those 5 words.
Through the chair, we're supportive of the inclusion of the words, given that the policy is going out for community consultation. Be interested to see what the feedback is from residents that do have frontages on laneways, and that will guide our feedback to back to council when it comes up for adoption. In respect to policy, it depends on the nature of the policy and what nature of discretion is built in for administration to make decisions around it. So some policies will be exceptionally prescriptive, others may not be. This is just one where the laneways and right-of-ways are quite different. They can have bends in them and the like. So the visual impact on a visual amenity could be quite different depending by case. So it gives that flexibility.
Through Mayor Cohen, just to add in terms of the city's discretion, the issue with graffiti really is the demand's always going to be greater than our supply of resources. So we do the best we can, but every day it's catch up with more tagging, more graffiti. So we're limited really by the amount of resources and manpower or contractors, people power that we can put towards that.
Councillors, any further comments or questions? Okay, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? Declare that carried. We're back to the substantive. Any further comments? I'll put the substantive motion. All those in favour? I declare that carried. Thank you. So that takes us then to item 11.4, Innovate Reconciliation Action Plan Outcome of Advertising. Moved by Councillor Loden, seconded by Councillor Wallace.
I think I've used up all my words and motivation. This is really good and I'm really excited about this. My one point I want to make is the thing we struggled with, and I said it the last time, was around the employment targets and the contractor targets. And these are the really, really meaty, challenging things that are going to make a real difference. So I want you guys to know that you got my support to do this. And if there's ways that we can make it easier, if this is a challenge, then please come back to council and talk to us about it further, because I know it's not easy. But I think if we can work together towards this, we can actually achieve something quite significant and really set a benchmark for how local governments engage with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island peoples and create significant, tangible opportunities for them going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Loden. Councillors, Councillor Wallace.
You don't have too much to say. Just fantastic piece of work and looking forward to its implementation.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Gontaszewski.
I just want to say that this is a document of substance, and I think that this round 2, I believe, of Innovate is fantastic. And I think that it is clear to me, although I'm not intimately involved with the process to get to here, as it is clear that there has been a change in thinking or a direction towards doing the challenging things that need to be done. And I think that there's the simplicity on the far side of complexity is where we all want to get to, and sometimes that requires really good, meaningful work, and that's what I think this is going to deliver if we can get to it. So congratulations to everyone involved.
I'd also, sorry, Councillor Alexander, did you have your hand up?
Yeah,
Yep,
sorry,
go ahead.
just a quick comment. Look, I agree, some of the parts where it's talking about actual people and people being involved, whether it's employment or whatever it might be, is really important, as opposed to, some of the ceremonial things are good, naming laneways and all those sorts of things. They're not nearly as effective as engaging with people and providing opportunity. So that's the part I really like about that.
Thanks, Councillor Alexander. Councillor Apollo.
I too am totally supportive of this. I think we probably didn't have the opportunity yet, but I know that we've appointed someone to act in this space within the City of Vincent. Now, I don't know if that person has, or that appointee has had the opportunity to, review the plan. But to the extent that they haven't, I'd hope that the CEO would use his discretion under point 2 to include any comments and as part of the foreword from that person. I think it's important that someone incoming into that role who's going to be guiding us in this space is obviously fully supportive of the plan that we're putting out there and has a chance to be part of the commentary.
Thanks, councillor Flo. Look, it's certainly been worked with our elders group who are seen as the leaders in this space. So just want to say a huge thank you to Uncle Ben Taylor, to Auntie Margaret Colbong, who will be celebrating in a memorial tomorrow at the City of Perth, who we've recently lost, and we'll be paying our respects to her with her family and with community leaders tomorrow, to Uncle Albert and Auntie Irene McNamara, to Auntie Muriel Bowie, to Rose Wally, Cheryl Martin, Cyril Yaron and Rodney Cox, who are on our Bridger Elders group. So this has really been the key piece that has really allowed us to move forward, and their input has been invaluable. Are there any further comments on the wrap? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? I declare that carried. Item 12.3, proposed repeal of policy number 4.1.8, nuclear free zone. Councillor Gontaszewski is moving, seconded by Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. I'm not supportive of this. I'm happy to have it as a position statement. I recognise it for what it is, but I think on certain issues, we need that symbolism is important. So I guess I would be supportive of an alternate that replaces the word repeal with retains. Thank you.
Councillor Loden.
Suspected that might be coming. I tend to agree. I'm happy to leave it in place. I know it's never in place, but you never know. Maybe the whole reason we don't have a big nuclear facility right next door is because we have this policy in place. So yeah, I'm happy to leave it as well.
Councillors, I generally feel similar. I think this policy has been in place since 1995. I would seek administration's advice under our policy. What is it called again? Policy review policy. It's not just about review, it's about how we structure our policies. So is there rather than it being a policy, because you've said that you don't think it's a policy, the content is not really policy orientated. I don't think we have any position statements. I just think we might just be better off leaving it as it is, because otherwise it's a procedure manual or something, and that doesn't apply either. That's even less applicable. So I'll move back to council, but if someone wishes to move an alternate of that variety, I would support it. Any further comments on this motion before you, the recommendation?
Yep.
Yes.
Look, I'm sort of ambivalent, because if nuclear power came to Western Australia, the City of Vincent, I'm sure, would probably be having it, because it'd be well discussed, and, a bit like, is the Queen going to be selecting the next Governor General? We're really not going to have any impact on it. So if I could not vote on this, I would. So it just sort of, if the time ever comes, I suspect City of Vincent won't be having an impact on it. So I understand the symbolism of it. I don't think anyone particularly likes nuclear power, but I'm just really not sure how to vote on it.
We might have a couple of seconds to contemplate. Does anyone else wish to speak? Okay, well, here's your time to make your decision, Councillor Alexander. Sometimes you just have to decide either way. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? I declare it lost. I'm seeking an alternate resolution.
Yes, the recommendation would be that council retains policy 4.1.8 nuclear free zone at attachment 1 and endorses the city becoming a signatory to the Mayors for Peace program.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by councillor Loden. Do you wish to speak to it?
Just to say that I do recognise this is something the city will need to affirm every 4 years, because this City of Vincent is doing a great job at reviewing our policies, and I'm incredibly supportive of that. So this is nothing against that, but I'm very happy to retain this policy.
Councillor Loden. Councillor Castle, did you wish to speak? Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, just someone needs to inform the newspapers that the city of Vincent will continue to be a nuclear-free zone. It's great, huge news.
We'll issue the media release imminently. Councillor Alexander.
I'll just put an amendment, which I suspect will be lost, that the city of Vincent to consider nuclear power if and when the time comes.
I don't think that's an amendment. I think that's an alternate. It's sort of the idea of an alternate motion is where it negates the intent of the motion. Executive Manager, do you have a view whether that's an alternate?
Mayor Cole, I'll just leave it alone. That's fine as it is.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
We're happy to explore this with you. Okay, all right, councillor Opolo.
A question to administration. Does WA have uranium? And do we sell it? Because I just want to know, it does talk about transporting it. If there's a train line that goes through the City of Vincent, then that would be a breach. If so, it was just a question about that.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I think there are 3 uranium mines in Western Australia, and I think it's transported out through Fremantle. No, because that has to come on the freight train line into Fremantle.
Any further questions before I put the motion, councillor? Oh, yes.
Sorry, Mayor. Given that it's an alternate motion and it's under the regulations require a reason why we're putting an alternate motion. I understand it because the council still supports this position statement and values its symbolism. Would that be a sufficient reason for council?
Perfection. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Executive Manager. Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. And just, I guess, in terms of that 4-yearly review, August is a good month for it to come to council because the anniversaries of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were the 6th and 9th of August. And so this is an opportunity for reflection and remembrance and action that the threat of nuclear weapons has not been relegated to that of a bygone era, but remains a present and real threat of our times.
And growing. Thank you. Is that part of the reason? Can we add that to the reason? That was beautiful. Thank you. Any further comments? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Declare that carried unanimously. Feel proud. Okay, we have 2 confidential items to deal with this evening. So I will just have to pause the live stream, but we'll return to read the decisions of council on those 2 items. So if we just pause the live stream, please.